Tonight, a tense primetime face-off. Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris in what may be their only debate.
The government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
They've sparred over policy, politics, and personality.
In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
We break down the big moments, the strategy behind them, and how it could all play with undecided voters.
Get out!
The new police body camera video raising questions about how officers treated an NFL star.
I do want to be able to use this platform to say, like, what if I wasn't Tyreek Hill, bro?
The traffic stop reigniting a conversation about race and policing.
Copy 1 Alpha.
SpaceX launches a challenging new mission, the first commercial spacewalk.
You're concentrating almost 110% to make sure that you don't make any mistake.
The 4 astronauts going where no civilian has gone before.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Tonight, with the stakes incredibly high, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris squared off in their first and potentially only presidential debate. It was a night of very tense exchanges, personal attacks, and at times frustration from a clearly rattled Trump.
And I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. He will talk about windmills cause cancer, and what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
One of several moments that stood out tonight as both Harris and Trump tried to make their mark with undecided voters with just 8 weeks until Election Day and the race appearing to be a dead heat. So Paul Hunter is in Philadelphia for us tonight. Paul, can you give us your sense of how things went, what it felt like, the moments that stood out to you?
Yeah, this was Kamala Harris on offense, Adrian. This was the candidate, I think it's fair to say, that Democratic supporters in this country have wanted to see, somebody who is capable of taking on Donald Trump in a way that Joe Biden, certainly in recent months, was not able to do. Kamala Harris went hard against Donald Trump on a long list of fronts. It started out with a handshake. Kamala Harris walking across the stage to say hello to Donald Trump. They'd never met before. This was their first debate, obviously, as well. And then the niceties very quickly went away. They talked about the economy very briefly off the top, soon enough turning to what many have deemed one of the strengths of Kamala Harris, and that's reproductive rights. I want to play a clip from her on that as she took it to Trump on abortion rights.
Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that.
Over the course of the debate, Adrian, she used her time to go after Trump on topic after topic after topic. He very quickly began to appear to be agitated, wagging his finger at times, calling her names, Marxist, radical left, liberal. When he started talking about his perspective that under Democrats the crime rates had gone up, Kamala Harris had this retort to that.
I think this is so rich. Coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing.
It's clear, Adrian, Kamala Harris was prepared. She had her list of subject matters that she wanted to take Donald Trump to task upon. And one by one, tonight, she seemed to do that. Donald Trump had his rejoinders. at one point raising the issue that many people thought had, or the moment rather, many people thought had changed this campaign when he was shot at that rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Here's a clip of Trump talking about that in terms of referencing what he was saying is the weaponization of the Department of Justice against him by Democrats. Here it is.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy.
You know, there's a long list of zingers, if you will, right, of good lines. They both land a lot of lines. You know, like you probably, I've been reaching out to a bunch of people to say just casually how to go, and I'm not seeing in just anecdotally people talking to me or even people online saying a clear winner, because Americans look at this differently, right? Some are looking at it for policy, some are looking at it for feel. Where you are in Philadelphia, is there any feel about a clear winner?
Keep in mind, Adrian, that feelings are so baked in, right? We come to these debates thinking that everything will change. It'll take one zinger or one policy being described or one vibe expressed to change people's minds. That's, in this country at this time, the hard truth is that's a hard ask, right? Opinions are long decided, especially when it comes to all things Trump, right? The idea of Harris, this energy and this enthusiasm that she's brought to the Democrat side is a real thing, right? That is a real thing. We've seen the result of that as the race tightened from what seemed to be a Trump walk a few weeks ago to a neck-and-neck race. I'm going to say it one more time. It comes down to the reason you don't hear from people, did this change any minds? It's because there aren't that many of them.
Yeah.
But they do exist. We will hear in the days ahead whether this reached any of them. It is on them that this race potentially will hinge in November. That's who Kamala Harris was talking to tonight. She wanted to remind them of what Donald Trump was like, the Donald Trump of 2016 to 2020, right up to January 6th, 2021. That was her intent tonight, to say, hey, remember that guy? Think about this when you head to the polls in November.
All right, Paul Hunter, as always, thank you for your insight. Paul Hunter in Philadelphia tonight. So we have more special debate coverage coming up. In about 30 minutes from now, our political panel will be here to break down how the big moments of the night might sway some undecided voters. Turning to other news now, newly released body camera video is raising serious questions about race and policing in the United States. Star NFL player Tyreek Hill was pulled over and detained in Florida on the way to a season opener. Jamie Strachan shows us the video and the reaction.
Hours before kickoff, Miami Dolphins star wide receiver Tyreek Hill was pulled over for reckless driving.
Get my ticket, bro, so I can go.
Things quickly spiraled. He handed the officer his license, then rolled up the tinted window of his high-end sports car.
Keep your window down. Don't tell me what. Keep your window down. I'm gonna get you out of the car. As a matter of fact, get out of the car. Get out. Get out. Get out. Get out. Damn.
Newly released body cam footage shows police ripping Hill out of the car.
When we tell you to do something, you do it. You understand? You understand? Not what you want, but what we tell you.
He is forced to the ground and handcuffed.
I just had surgery on my knee, bro. I just had surgery in your ears when we told you to put your window down.
Hill was never arrested and was eventually given 2 traffic citations and released.
I do want to be able to use this platform to say, like, what if I wasn't Tyreek Hill, bro?
His team went further, saying it's both maddening and heartbreaking to watch the very people we trust to protect our community use such unnecessary force and hostility. One officer has already been placed on leave. An internal investigation is underway. The police union defended officers' actions, saying Mr. Hill was not immediately cooperative with officers, who, fearing for their immediate safety, placed Mr. Hill in handcuffs.
I'm getting arrested.
The video has reignited discussion around what is often called driving while black.
Is there any way that an old white woman rolls up that window and is met with that response?
This expert says the fact that Hill is black can't be ignored.
It's absolutely outrageous. And again, I think it's almost impossible to separate that escalation from the identity of the person behind the wheel.
No need to escalate.
This retired officer agrees, but also says police safety can't be overlooked.
I could immediately relate with their concerns, safety concerns, especially with the dark tinted windows. The tactics I understand, however, the intensity of those tactics did not meet that occasion.
Hill did make it to the game, scoring a key touchdown. The celebration, a nod to the police encounter. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Back in Canada, the man many have speculated could replace Justin Trudeau made his first public comments as a top Liberal advisor on economic growth. Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada, appeared today at the caucus retreat. But as Rafi Boudjikanian shows us, he wouldn't reveal much about his political future.
For months, Mark Carney dodged questions about his future with the Liberals. Now, the former governor of central banks in Canada and England is the party's top advisor on economic growth.
It comes at, in my view, a decisive time for our economy, for our country. Every major economy is accelerating their energy transition, and being low carbon is becoming a key driver of competitiveness.
Carney wouldn't respond to speculation he might be seeking the party leadership or a seat in the next federal election.
Prime Minister of Canada asked me to do something, I will do it. I will serve to the best of my ability. Secondly, I'm interested in doing something, not being something.
Shoring up voter support is top of mind here. A key test comes in less than a week. A long-standing Liberal seat is up for grabs in a Montreal by-election, with Liberals, NDP, and the Bloc Québécois running almost neck and neck.
I'm convinced we will win.
Oh, wow. Merci beaucoup. The NDP leader campaigned in that riding after his caucus met to consider in part how to approach the confidence votes that could bring down the government, now that his party has abandoned the agreement to keep the Liberals in power.
We're not looking for a new agreement. So we've torn up the agreement. There is no new deal. What we're going to do in the next parliament is we're going to fight for people.
But the Liberals may get support from the Bloc.
How do you feel about getting all of this additional power?
Good. Thank you.
That instability also means Trudeau may not have a full year left before all Canadians head back to the polls, making whatever strategy his party devises here all the more crucial for their survival in the months ahead. Rafi Boudjikanian on CBC News, Nanaimo, BC.
The immigration minister now confirms that a Pakistani national arrested last week on terror charges entered Canada using a student visa.
Yeah, he was granted a student visa in May of 2023, and he entered at Pearson Airport June 24th.
Mohammed Shahzad Khan is accused of plotting to enter the U.S. and attack a Jewish center in Brooklyn. Canadian authorities detained him in Quebec near the U.S. border, and he faces charges in both countries. In Gaza, Palestinian officials say at least 19 people are dead, dozens are injured after Israel's early morning strike on a humanitarian safe zone. Tens of thousands of displaced people were sheltering there. But Israel's military says senior Hamas militants were hiding among them. Chris Brown shows us the devastating result.
Israel's latest strike in Gaza involved blasting a giant crater in the middle of an encampment of tents beside a Gaza beach. The attack killed and wounded dozens of Palestinians, but it was only by daylight that its horrific scope was revealed. 12-year-old Rosanne Al-Fad was crushed by debris. The tent fell on us and my mother was injured, she said. I don't know which hospital she's in, and my brother died. May he rest in peace. We pulled our children out. They were all buried under the sand, said Abasan Al-Rai. Death surrounds us in every place and we don't know where to go. Where will we go? Israel's military had designated this a safe zone, but it said 3 senior Hamas militants established a headquarters there, so the decision was made to hit them with what they called precise munitions.
The government can confirm these terrorists were directly involved in the October 7th massacre.
In a statement, Hamas denied its members were in the area, saying Israel's government was just trying to justify heinous crimes. Aid groups have repeatedly accused Israel's military of not prioritizing the safety of civilians, and there was more such condemnation after this strike.
When we have children being killed, families being destroyed, annihilated, disappeared from the registries, It's a clear sign that something is not going right.
As he arrived in the UK, the US Secretary of State did not mention the deaths in Gaza, but he did issue a rebuke to Israel. American Turkish activist Aysenur Egi was shot in the head by an Israeli sniper while at a protest on Friday. Israel says she was hit unintentionally. Blinken called her death unacceptable and unjustified.
In our judgment, Israeli security forces need to make some fundamental changes in the way that they operate in the West Bank, including changes to their rules of engagement.
In the aftermath of the overnight attacks, local health authorities said the death toll in Gaza has now surpassed more than 41,000 dead over the past 11 months, with 90% of Gaza's population displaced. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Some Canadian families are in limbo tonight after China abruptly banned most foreign adoptions. As Ithil Musa tells us, the policy shift marks a major setback for those navigating the adoption process.
Michel Leblanc's family moved to a bigger home in Trois-Rivières in anticipation of a new family member. They had already adopted 2 children from China. Now their hopes of adopting another are dashed.
La façon dont ça nous a été annoncé.
The way it was announced to us without any consideration, it's inhumane, she says. LeBlanc found out on social media that China was ending its international adoption program.
C'est beaucoup de stress financier.
It's a lot of financial stress. It's emotional stress, she says, because you have to be able to tell the grandparents who won't have a baby. China's foreign ministry didn't provide an explanation. Births in the country have been plummeting for decades because of China's one-child policy. That policy ended in 2016. Chinese couples are now allowed to have up to 3 children.
Population dynamics in China is always as much a demographic issue as it's a political one. Domestic adoption or international adoption is inevitably fraught. It touches on some of the most fundamental questions of human conditions, like who gets recognized, who gets counted.
In Canada, adoptees from China are also trying to process what this news means.
It does feel like an end of an era, and maybe in some ways that's good because if there's less of a need for children to be adopted.
Rottenberg hopes China's new rule on foreign adoptions will not make it harder for adoptees like her to find their birth parents. While for Michel Leblanc, the dream to expand her family.
Pour nous, ça va être terminé.
It's hard to kill the hope in your heart, she says, but at the given moment, as humans, there are limits to the grief one can endure. The federal government says it's working closely with its contacts in China to review the country's new policy. Ithil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Musician Jacob Hoggard, who is serving a 5-year sentence for sexual assault, is asking to be released on bail. A lawyer for the former lead singer of Headley told an Ontario courtroom today that bail was appropriate as Hoggard tries to appeal his conviction to the Supreme Court of Canada. In a court filing, Hoggard said he's being held in solitary confinement after receiving threats. The justice reserved her decision until later this week. Well, coming up, the dawn of a new era in space exploration.
4, 3, 2, 1, ignition,
SpaceX's Polaris Dawn blasts off on board an all-civilian crew. The mission is a risky one, the first ever private spacewalk. Plus,
well, we knew that it was coming, so we've been pretty excited.
The highly coveted Michelin restaurant guide is bringing its star system to Quebec, but not everyone is eating it up. We're back in 2. Francine has now reached hurricane status as it plows towards the U.S. Gulf Coast. Louisiana will likely be hit hardest. The state has already closed schools, issued evacuation orders, and declared a state of emergency in preparation for landfall on Wednesday. And crews across Southern California are scrambling to contain several major wildfires just east of Los Angeles. Thousands remain under mandatory evacuation orders as the massive line fire threatens hundreds of homes and businesses. After quadrupling in size, it's now one of the largest in the state. Well, a crew aboard SpaceX's latest mission is in orbit tonight, going where no one has gone in decades. And as Nicole Mortellero tells us, they'll be attempting something that's never been done, a privately funded spacewalk.
3, 2, 1, ignition, and go Falcon, go Polaris.
The latest private mission, known as Polaris Dawn, is ambitious. A crew of 4 civilian astronauts with a risky job. The first commercial spacewalk from a SpaceX capsule.
It's been a really exciting journey.
On board, billionaire entrepreneur Jared Isaacman, retired military pilot Kid Poteet, and 2 SpaceX engineers, Sarah Gillis and Anna Menon. They're set for a 5-day mission venturing as far as 1,400 kilometers from Earth, the farthest humans have been since Apollo in 1972. On day 3, 2 of the crew will attempt the spacewalk in new streamlined suits, including Jared Isaacman.
It'll look like we're doing a little bit of a dance, and what that is we're going through a series of test matrix on the suit, and the idea is to learn as much as we possibly can.
For the spacewalk, there is no airlock on board. Instead, the entire spacecraft will be depressurized and exposed to the vacuum of space. Retired Canadian astronaut Dave Williams, who's logged 17 hours on 3 different spacewalks, says this mission is challenging, but in some ways, it's a throwback.
This really takes us back to the dawn of spacewalking. The astronaut went outside using an umbilical tether, which basically restricted their mobility a little bit compared to what we have with our life support systems on the back of the space station spacesuits.
It's an ambitious endeavor, but one that is looked at as a potential step in the human exploration of space.
To see SpaceX sending astronauts into space, doing these high-altitude missions, and doing the first private spacewalk is the next step in a very important journey.
We can see it separating from the second stage.
A journey that both SpaceX and NASA hope will see humans on Mars. Nicole Mortellero, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, the Michelin Guide will soon be handing out stars to some Quebec restaurants.
I don't want it to be you go into a restaurant and then they're clicking the box.
Why some worry about how it could change the city's culinary scene. There she is, Australian breakdancer Rachel Gunn, known as Raygun, who went viral after her unusual Olympic routine, is now ranked the world #1 in her sport. How? That ranking is a result of multiple competitions, many of which other breakers didn't compete in, and the Olympics weren't included. Well, restaurants in Quebec now face a new measure of excellence. The world-famous Michelin Guide has added that province to the list of cities and regions where it tests and ranks the very finest of dining spots. Sarah Levitt asked how that fresh scrutiny might go over.
It's long been the benchmark for fine dining. The Michelin Guide, created in 1900 as a travel guidebook. Ever since, chefs around the world have coveted those elusive stars. And now restaurants in Quebec are in the running.
We've been pretty excited.
Montreal has always been seen as the culinary capital of Canada, though Michelin first went to Toronto and Vancouver. This chef believes having the Michelin Guide here will provide an economic boost.
Do I believe that we needed Michelin before now? I don't think so. Am I glad that they're here? Absolutely.
But other chefs worry the Guide's emphasis on fine dining is restrictive and Eurocentric. In rewarding stars, the Guide looks at the quality of the ingredients, mastery of cooking and culinary techniques, harmony of flavors, personality of the dishes, and consistency.
I don't want it to be you go into a restaurant and then they're clicking the box.
Antonio Park is a culinary superstar not just in Montreal but around the world. He worries restaurants in the city will try to chase stars, changing the dynamic of the scene.
We are all about the whole package of giving them pleasure, making them feel like home. We're a city where, la joie de vivre.
Still,
yes, I want one, 2 or 3.
Michelin was given $2.1 million in grants over 3 years, including money from the city, province, and Ottawa. This to a company worth billions of dollars.
Why do they get so much funding so quickly?
For the past 10 years, Elise Tasté has built up her own guide to Quebec restaurants.
Michelin targeting to like people who want that and high-end restaurant, like getting those tourists, I think is fantastic. There is going to be less visibility for the smaller restaurant, but that's where I come in.
Just who gets those stars will be revealed in 2025. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
And now I'm hungry. Time now to break down the news shaping our world. And tonight, it is all about the U.S. presidential debate.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy.
Just one memorable moment from tonight's heated U.S. presidential debate. Donald Trump tying the rhetoric from Democrats to his attempted assassination. His opponent, Kamala Harris, attacked right back on Trump's criminal cases, his actions on January 6th, and his campaign rallies. So let's bring in our political panel to break down the key moments of this debate. Chris Cillizza is CNN's former editor-at-large. Katie Simpson is in Battleground, North Carolina. And Washington Post national columnist Philip Bump is in New York. So, Katie, can we start? You know what? Let's not start with the debate. Let's start with a major endorsement that many have been waiting for. Taylor Swift endorsing Kamala Harris right after the debate. I think we have a board where we can show you her endorsement. She signs it, I think, childless cat lady. How big of an impact is that, as well as her nudge to people to just go register to vote?
Well, this is not necessarily a surprise, but it's certainly something that the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz campaign, they are going to welcome. Taylor Swift has waded into politics before, and often they'll cite, you know, she put on her Instagram story urging people, a message to her followers and her supporters, urging them to register to vote. And in the 24 hours after she did that, certain places in the United States saw a surge in people registering to vote. We've seen politicians in Washington try to avoid upsetting her. People like Senator Marsha Blackburn, who's a Republican from Tennessee, staunch ally of Donald Trump. She said she was questioned about Taylor Swift criticizing Republicans from her home state, and she walked so carefully to try to not upset Taylor Swift and the Swifties. She's one of the most famous people in the world, so of course there's going to be a lot of excitement and enthusiasm from the Harris camp on that one.
Okay, but let's talk about their feelings from both camps after this debate. Philip, last time there was an immediate feeling that Joe Biden was in enormous political trouble, right? That there was no other talking point or any other overwhelming sensation after the debate. That was the single narrative.
Right.
I don't know about this one because it was a rattling, fierce debate to watch, but I don't know if there's a single narrative.
Yeah, I feel like there's certainly not to the extent that there was in June when Joe Biden came out and gave the performance that he did. But I think it's very clear that Kamala Harris was the more effective debater in this exchange for a variety of reasons. I mean, she was more pointed, she was more prepared on her comments, she was less likely to stray, and she very successfully goaded him multiple times into talking about what she wanted him to talk about. Donald Trump has never been a strong debater. He has consistently, with the exception of that Biden debate, consistently been outperformed, and it hasn't really mattered over the long run, which is probably the key lesson we should take away here. But that said, yeah, I mean, while it certainly wasn't the sort of game changer that we saw in June, I think it's very hard to argue that Donald Trump came out doing better tonight than did Kamala Harris.
Yeah, interesting point about the debates. I think we're all reminded that people said that Hillary Clinton won both the debates after, with Donald Trump, and that didn't make a whit of difference. Abortion was a hot topic. It was inevitably going to be discussed tonight. And if we do have a clip here, so let's take a listen to what Vice President Harris had to say on that.
Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot? She didn't want that.
Hey, Chris, 90 minutes is a long time. Is anyone going to remember that moment?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they probably will, because I think the Harris campaign will smartly push that answer out to literally everyone on social media and fundraising emails and that sort of thing. And remember, debates are about moments, and I think that was a moment for her. And frankly, politics and debates particularly are about accentuating the things you want to talk about and spending less time on the things you don't want to talk about. Donald Trump goes into that debate wanting to talk about the economy and immigration. Kamala Harris wants to talk about abortion as much as she can. There was a lot more abortion talk, particularly in the first 30 to 40 minutes when the audience is going to be the largest, because it's 9 o'clock hour on the East Coast. Then there was immigration, and then there was the economy, and I think that's a win. I'm with Philip. I think it's hard to say how much this impacts the race, but I think it's easy to say that on points she won the debate, and I don't think it was particularly close.
So all of us are sitting here imagining what people are thinking. Katie was at a watch party in the, I guess, newly minted swing state of North Carolina. It wasn't always a swing state. I'm curious about two things, Katie. Firstly, in that moment that we're talking about, did that feel like a moment in the room? And also, what are you picking up from what people heard tonight?
It certainly did feel like a moment inside the room, because the people inside were mostly Democrats who were watching this debate at this particular party that we were here in Charlotte. They really, a lot of people were really pleased with the debate performance that they saw from Kamala Harris. There were moments where they cheered when Kamala Harris would seem to roll her eyes or sort of laugh at some of the things that Donald Trump was saying, some of his more outlandish claims, like things about migrants eating pets or claims about election fraud. That certainly got a strong reaction from people in this room. A lot of them have already made up their mind they're going to be voting for Kamala Harris. But one thing that will really stand out to me, Adrian, is that I spoke with one woman who is a Democrat. She's supporting Kamala Harris. She's knocking on doors for her. But she says in this moment, when she looks at these two candidates, from her perspective, the choice is clear. That there is no sort of there's no really... She doesn't think it should be a close contest, and she's so frustrated that in this country, in the United States at this moment, that this race appears to be dead even, to be split, and she finds it so frustrating when she looks at a candidate like Kamala Harris, who she thinks is competent, who she thinks would represent America really well in the world, and she looks at Donald Trump, who she does not agree with and does not support. She finds it so frustrating that this race is close.
Interesting. I'd like to play us another clip if we can. This one is Donald Trump. He's angry. He's talking about immigration. He's talking about the things that happen when people come into the United States. And it's strange, so buckle up here.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
So, look, this was very quickly fact-checked by the moderators, which was an interesting thing that happened in this debate, right? This was unusual. They were doing real-time fact-checking is not being true. But, Philip, what did that moment tell you about this debate and the strategy they were both employing here?
Yeah, I mean, it told me a couple of things about Trump here. The first is that he, as always, going back to this well of immigrants are dangerous and scary. That's why he launched his campaign in June 2015 with that exact same rhetoric. It has been his go-to. It's what made him successful in 2016, the Republican nominating contest. It's what continues to keep his base strong today. But it also showed to me that he is so mired in his bubble, so deep inside this conversational space in which that claim, this nonsensical racist trope about immigrants eating pets from their neighbors, really started to percolate very heavily on the right-wing conversational space, Twitter and those sorts of places yesterday. And it very quickly got to Trump's team, and this is something that his base is really excited about, making these really gross and false claims, and that he was unable to understand that in the moment, this isn't the place to talk about that. That first of all, he didn't deliver it well. He didn't make the claim in a sensible way to people who didn't know what he was talking about, but that he didn't understand that this was not the time and place for it, I think was pretty remarkable and a sign of the way in which Kamala Harris was better able to actually debate within the context of the debate.
You know, we talked a lot before this debate about, you know, how is Donald Trump going to walk this line? Because he has been accused, he has said some, you know, misogynistic things, a fair amount of them, in the past. It's been difficult sometimes for him to navigate the space with debating a woman in particular. How is he going to handle it? Any thoughts on how he did there, Chris?
You know, he sort of only has one speed, you know, one gear. I'm not sure it's that different with women than men. I mean, he's just kind of he's sort of bullying and sort of that kind of presence. I will say I was struck at one point. He was talking and Harris said something off mic and he turned into quiet please, which if that had happened with any other politician not named Donald Trump and a female candidate, it would be a huge thing. And because it's Donald Trump, I think we're like, well, it's not that big a deal. I mean, you know, I cannot imagine his answers on abortion. Not that all women are single issue voters on that, but I think it is more personal to many women. I cannot imagine his answers on abortion were particularly persuasive. And again, to finish where we started, I do think that was her single best answer of the night. Personalizing it, saying, you know, Donald Trump's sort of flip response has always been, everyone wanted Roe v. Wade to be overturned. And that's always not been true. But to call it out and say there are, you know, people who are have a child as the result of incest or rape or have a problem with their pregnancy, you know, to really personalize, I think is powerful, particularly coming from a woman, and particularly, as you point out, against someone like Donald Trump, who has made so many comments about women in a derogatory way.
Yeah, you know, Philip, there was a lot of conversation beforehand. People want to hear about policy. They want to hear policy. I mean, how many times did people tell us this? They also want to hear foreign policy. So they got some foreign policy. What's your sense of whether they were actually paying attention?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't mean to be a cynic. People don't want to hear about policy. People don't really care that much. They want to have in the broad strokes what policy is. They want to know where people stand on abortion, but they don't want to hear, you know, I think one of Donald Trump's, the lines that will last the longest was when he was asked if he finally had a plan to replace healthcare, which he's been saying he has since 2016. He says, well, you have concepts of plans, which is just such a ridiculous answer. But it's very much speaking to that, yeah, I mean, no one ever expected him to actually have a plan on healthcare. What people are watching these debates for, and look, debates are not good proxies for being president. As president, you'll get there and you don't, you know, a good president isn't someone who's able to out-debate someone, right? It's how we sort of do this thing. And so what people take away from the debates is just sort of a sense of how people, you know, the sense they get from the candidate to a large extent. You know, I think that the idea that we all like to pride ourselves on, well, I really want to know what their policies are, but I don't think that's what makes a difference. And I think it's going to be little nuggets, little incidents like the quotes from Harris that you played and from Trump that you played that spread on social media. I think those are going to have an effect far more than if there had been a really detailed substantive policy discussion.
Ooh, what a world this is. All right, Philip Bump, Chris Liza, Katie Simpson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
One does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body.
Another notable moment from tonight's U.S. presidential debate, Kamala Harris on the key issue of abortion rights. Her opponent, Donald Trump, hit back on immigration and the border. So let's pull the lens out a little bit wider, take a look at the race itself. Ellen Morrow has been on this for us for some time now. Ellen, with, I guess, precisely 8 weeks to go now, how do things look?
Well, one word, Adrienne, the race is tight. Based on its latest poll that was published earlier this week, the New York Times says it's the tightest race in modern polling history. And that's why there was so much at stake on a night like tonight. So we can show you at home what that New York Times poll looked like. You see there a very narrow lead for Donald Trump, 48% to 47%. And one reason, besides just how tight this is, that this poll is getting so much attention is because it was the first lead for Trump in a major national poll in about a month. So going into the debate, that was raising some concern for Democrats that the initial momentum that Harris had could be slowing, with possibly a shifting back to Trump, who was leading before Harris entered the race. Now, of course, we'll see what happens after the debate. This was one poll. Obviously, polls are just a snapshot in time, but it suggests that support for Donald Trump has been resilient despite the shakeup in the race. But again, this was a nationwide poll. What really matters are just those undecided voters, and really just those undecided voters in those key swing states. And you can see them there. 7 states will decide the entire outcome of this race. Places like Georgia, Rust Belt states, Nevada. And just to talk about one of those places specifically, we can talk about Pennsylvania, which is really key to this whole race. It has 19 electoral college votes, more than any other swing state. The trend in polling a month ago had Harris a few points ahead. More recent polling, again, has that race neck and neck. We'll see what the debate does.
Okay, so how does that context play into the specifics of what you heard for the candidates tonight? Because I know you were listening carefully to how they were playing to those voters.
Well, we saw it throughout the debate. You know, think about just that first question. It was about the cost of living. Donald Trump answered it, but then immediately pivoted in that very same answer to immigration and the southern border. And we saw him go back to those two subjects over and over again in his usual hyperbolic language, no matter what the question actually was. And that's because he knows those are vulnerabilities for Kamala Harris as part of the Biden administration, and they are very important issues for voters. So he's really trying to stake his candidacy on those two things. Now, for Kamala Harris, we heard her argue that Donald Trump poses a threat to democracy, talking about what it was like on Capitol Hill on January 6th. She also really went after Donald Trump on abortion and reproductive rights, another key issue for voters. Now, that's the policy. When it comes to the performance of the debate, you know, we really saw Kamala Harris repeatedly try and often successfully bait Donald Trump. There's one point where she talks about his rallies, and she says people leave them out of boredom over what he's saying. That visibly irked Trump. It prompted this rambling answer on crowd sizes in a question that was actually about his topic, the border. So that was one notable moment. You know, Donald Trump didn't look at Harris very much throughout the debate, but she made a point of basically staring at him for most of his answers with, you know, a quizzical look, at some point shaking her head and saying that's not true. And again, the performance and the policy all goes back to those undecided voters. I talked to a Republican strategist earlier today and he said that no matter what else Donald Trump says or does, it doesn't matter. They think that he can get back to the White House on those two issues of the economy and immigration. Harris is very clearly trying to show Donald Trump as extreme, trying to position herself as a more stable, as a more rational choice to those undecided voters and to Republicans who perhaps just don't want to vote for Donald Trump this time around.
Wow, this is excellent analysis. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. You know, we'll be talking 10,000 more times.
My pleasure. Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks very much. So, up next, a license plate collector's lucky find.
Walking in there, it was like Disneyland.
How he struck gold in our moment. So what is that, you're wondering? Well, you're looking at thousands of New Brunswick license plates, rusted and dating back to the 1950s, and they're all laid out across a forest floor in Fredericton. For a local license plate collector, finding this treasure trove was a dream come true, and tonight his discovery makes our moment.
I have a friend, a good friend that lives in Burt's Corner. He took me out and showed me this place. And you'd never know it's there, but it's absolutely polluted with license plates all over the ground. I said, I've known you for like 30 years. How long have you known about this? And he said, oh, all my life. What? Walking in there, it was like Disneyland for license plate people. Well, they're New Brunswick plates, primarily 1959, 60, and 61. And they're all different types of plates. Have you ever seen The Simpsons when Homer went to Chocolate Land?
The land of chocolate.
I was like, oh, where do I start, right? And then you're down on your hands and knees digging. And the worst part about it is, I mean, you get a plate in your hand and you think, wow, look at that. and then you look over and see a better one, and that one goes away. I think I probably walked out with about 30 plates.
Okay, this is wild. Why is this happening? Well, it seems that, back in the day, they actually issued a brand new plate every single year. And because of kind of the wax coating on it, they really couldn't do anything with it. And so these kind of license plate graveyards are apparently all over New Brunswick. Well, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to the Nationals YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.